Jackie's here, changing life loving you. Yeah, that's the groove, life loving you. Feel the truth, move, life loving you. It's all we do, come on through, it's just for you.
Hey there, and welcome to Love, Life, and You with Dr. Jacquie, America's relationship coach. Before we dive in, we want to give you a gentle heads up. Today's episode covers sensitive topics, including sexual abuse and the journey of healing from trauma. Dr. Jacquie will be sharing her personal story, and while this conversation is about resilience and overcoming adversity, we understand that it may be heavy for some listeners. Please take care of yourself as you listen, and remember, you're not alone. If you ever need support, don't hesitate to reach out to trusted resources or someone you feel safe with. Now, let's get into the conversation.
Hey, Dr. Jacquie here again, and thank you for joining my podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. So now we're going to pick up where we left off from part one. I think we closed out everything talking about how to take responsibility, but I really drove home the point that if you've been molested or abused, any childhood trauma that you've experienced, you're a minor. There is no responsibility for you to take regarding that. You were a victim. The only responsibility that you can possibly have is you working on how am I going to heal? And that is a big undertaking, but it's an undertaking that's worthwhile. But even if you were, say, raped or anything, even as an adult, again, I think that the line of divide is, were you victimized? We're talking about things that just happen in the regular lumps and bumps of life and how we have to take responsibility to make sure that we reshape ourselves and that we grow on and don't stay stuck in the past. But not staying stuck in the past is really important also for people that have gone through things like me. I was molested as a child. But I determined that I didn't want that to color the rest of my life. I didn't want to use that crayon on anything else. It was bad enough that I went through it, but I refused to let it steal my future. And so even though I had that mind frame regarding it, I've still had to do a lot of weeding over the years. I can see some weeds that have grown up in between the cracks of my life, and I've had to pull some of those weeds up because they were unexpected. They were unwanted also. And so I had to make sure that they didn't creep into my life and begin to cause problems. So anyways, let's start.
Doc, for sure. So one major question I would have is, or just a thought. It's so, I got different sites from different places. It says understanding that your trauma is not a reflection of your worth, it's a liberating truth. What can you say about people who have tied what happened to them to their self-worth?
Yeah, I think that's an easy thing to do because it's so debilitating and it takes your sense of dignity away from you. You don't know what it's like to be victimized when someone does something to you against your will. And you just begin to recognize what they took. You feel like you can never get it back. So I think that that's just a big portion of being a victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I had to change hats. I had to trade that victimization for a crown. And I know that sounds kind of tacky, but I had to somehow make up in my mind what I was going to believe about my scenario. I think a lot of times when we're victimized, we might feel that, was there something that I did wrong? Did I bring that on myself? Was I complicit? And the reason why people sometimes feel that they might have been complicit is because they just don't understand. If someone does something to you, so we're talking about sexual stuff now, but say that you were raped or whatever, or molested. Your organs, your genitalia doesn't have eyes. So they don't know if it's a man touching them, a female touching them, somebody their same age. They're going to react the way that your genitalia is supposed to act. And I think sometimes it's been noted in journals that even when someone's being raped, they might even experience an orgasm. Doesn't mean that they agreed or wanted to be raped. It's just your genitalia, they do what they do. Mm. And so all of those mixed messages and all of those different feelings together make it difficult to sort through and to find yourself in the midst of this variable and that variable. So that's what I would say to it.
Awesome. There's a stat that says that over 70% of trauma survivors feel empowered when they affirm that the pain inflicted was not their fault.
Yes.
So, what would you say? I know you have a book called Trauma Treatment, and you talk
Mhm.
about reclaiming, acknowledging. What would you say to that stat and to your own experience with that?
It's important to talk about your trauma. It's important to tease it out, um, to really tease it out. I remember I was in a session because I teach all of my couples. I believe you should see a therapist at least once a year or whenever you're having conflict in your relationship. It's important. It keeps the damage down and the resentment down, and it brings you to a place of resolve when you can have a third voice. I was in a session with a therapist with my husband, and I just mentioned, I don't know how it came up, but the fact that I had been molested came up. And I told her the scenario, what happened to me. She says, "Oh, you're a fighter." And at first I thought that she was just being kind, trying to,
Mm,
placate me or whatever. And she went on to explain, "Oh, yeah, you're a fighter. That's what I can see from that." And I was like, "Well, where do you get that from?" And she says, "Well, your whole narrative was around how he did this to this child in front of you, but you refused. And even though he punished you and starved you and, isolated you, you refused, So you were a fighter. And just your mind frame of deciding that this is not going to destroy my life. And then you went and you told about it." She said, "That shows that you're a fighter." If I would have never heard that lady say that, maybe I would have still bore some more of the fallout from the
mm,
molestation. But I felt like that really like cleaned it up for me. Like those last little hairs that were left, it just cleaned it up for me. Yeah. So I think sharing your trauma is really important.
mhm,
Teasing out the parts. If you feel, because you know how it is when you feel ashamed, because that's the thing that I feel like trauma does to you,
mhm,
particularly if it's sexual in nature. Um, there's a lot of shame involved. Shame that it happened. Shame that you didn't know what to do with it.
mhm,
Shame that, um, I don't know, sharing it with people. Anything that I felt like I couldn't share, then I knew that was a place to dig. It was hard for me
mm,
to tell somebody about it. That was a place for me to dig. So that was those were the crumbs that showed me the path to my work.
mm.
So whatever I was ashamed to reveal, then that meant there's still some unresolved issues there.
I see.
Yeah. So almost using your truth meter.
Mm,
Listen, if there's anything that you feel ashamed of that you can change, that's all you got to do is change it. That lets you know where your work is. Some people like to blame other people and say, "Oh, you made me feel ashamed. You're judging me or whatever." No. If you feel ashamed, typically is an indication that that's where there's something unresolved. So if it's trauma, sometimes it's just you feel ashamed because you know that you're living below your level, your potential.
mm,
But for me, that was my go-to until I was able to tease out every area where I felt any sense of shame. Now I don't go around waving my flag. I was abused. I was molested. I'm not out there trying to tout my horn or
mm,
tell any and everybody that wants to hear, but I feel that I'm pretty free in acknowledging that. And I'm hoping that when people see that I was victimized and they can see, okay, well, she looks like she made it through, because I'm pretty much what you see is what you get,
mhm,
that they understand it wasn't easy, because there's always some work with anything that we do, but the payout is going to be
mm,
worth it. So I would say any trauma that you have, figure out whether you can easily talk about it. Your ease or dis-ease with talking about it is essential, because if you have an uneasiness about sharing about it, that means that there's something unresolved. If that something unresolved still remains, it can lead to dis-ease, real disease,
mm,
because you actually carry trauma in the organs of your body. So, you're talking about cancers or problems with different organs in the body. You really want to free yourself from that. It's for your own good. Again, it's about that trauma still impacting you years and years and years later. Could be decades. And now you have a disease because
mm.
of something that someone did to you, many, many decades before.
Awesome. That is actually super insightful. And one thing that I wanted to kind of just highlight on was you talked about like the breadcrumbs that led to your healing, and you said it was with a therapist. A lot of people advocate for trying to find a safe space or
Mhm.
try to create that safe space for healing What do you say to that? It seems like you were talking to your therapist with your husband. So safe, trusted people who helped you explore that. How do you people get to that safe space to even get to explore or even get to a point of recognizing what's going on with them?
I think everybody has somebody. If you don't have a close friend, you got maybe a parent. If you don't have a parent, you can write yourself a letter. But I'm going to be honest with you. I've been in certain positions in my life where I didn't even care how trusted the person was. My desire to be better, my desire to get to the other side of my healing was so strong that that didn't matter. Like, I didn't care if you went and told somebody else. I didn't care if you wanted to judge it. I knew that I need to unburden myself and talk it out. So there's plenty of people that I don't trust that I've shared something about myself with because my drive to be healed and to be whole was stronger than my concern about whether they could be trusted with the information. Now, I don't expect that everybody will feel that way, but it's a good thing to me to be that thirsty, that driven to be made whole. So, there's a passage that I love. It says, share your faults with one another that you might be healed. So in other words, there's a promise that God gives you that when you share your faults, when you're open and transparent about them, he's promising you that he's going to heal you. So for me, that's the word that I go on because I want to be whole that bad. If I have to shame or be ashamed or hide myself, who I really am from somebody, then that means I'm not being authentic. Authenticity to me is you being who you are with your flaws. I'm not going to lie and say I feel so comfortable. It's so wonderful for people to see my flaws. No, you feel some kind of way about it. But that's not the most important thing. To me, the most important thing is that I am who I am. What's going to be the determining factor for me is how you respond to me being me. If you're going to give me some flack about it or you're judgy or whatever, then that lets me know that you're not qualified to be in my circle. But I'm going to have to be who I am. And it takes a lot of energy. I've lived my life where I wore a mask and where I tried to fit in or be this certain type of person that people looked at. And once I took it off, I swore I'd never put it back on again. It is so freeing. The amount of energy, you wouldn't think that it takes up that much energy, but it really takes up a lot of energy to wear a mask or to present yourself as someone other than you're not. I'm just not going to do it.
It sounded like that you had like you vetted them, you saw that you had to enact a boundary to make sure that you were still free to be yourself.
What I'm saying is, whether the person's been vetted by me, whether they've come off tested and found pure or not, I'm saying I might not get to that point with them because I don't care. My desire to be free and whole is more important. So even though I haven't vetted you and I don't know how you're going to respond, I'm going to still show my authenticity and be me and show myself. Now I can look at how you respond to that and I can make adjustments going forward if I want to. But I'm going to tell you, a lot of times I still don't. What I found about people is this: nobody's perfect. So who am I to judge? Because I got my own set of flaws. And people are usually acting out because they're in pain. They might offend you. They might say stuff about you, do things to you. Usually it's a result of their own pain. So here's my thing. I've learned to take from people what are their strengths or the good things that they bring to me through a relationship. And then the things that are bad about them, I try not to judge them on that, but I know don't mess with them in those areas. And I think I talked about it before, about a friend of mine. Yeah. She was kind of like a user. Listen, to this day, if I'm sick, she's going to be here. I don't even know how she found out the last time I had surgery. It was emergency surgery. She was there when I woke up. But like, if it comes to her borrowing something from you or owing you something, you're not going to get that. So fiscally, she cannot be trusted. But as a friend and a person that cares about you and takes care of you, she's there. So she don't tick all of my boxes. Who does?
That's good.
We're living in a real world looking for imperfection, which is a fallacy. You need to turn on Disney and stuff and watch stuff like that. It's just non-existent. It's unrealistic. It's unresponsible for you to even think that way. Look, if you're looking at me, I might look good on this camera. That's because I curled my hair this morning. I put on a little bit of foundation, but I'm flawed. My heart is good though. I love people. I mean good by people, but I'm probably going to get on your nerves or hurt your feelings at one time or another. But it doesn't change who I am. I'm imperfect. My husband's imperfect, but imperfect. I've been married. It'll be 35 years next month.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what would you say about embracing your imperfections while healing from your trauma? Because a lot of people tie their imperfections to their trauma. You've been able to identify my imperfections are part of myself and my trauma is something that happened to me.
It goes back to what I said before in part one. I found that nothing bad happens to you that does not still have a silver lining. I don't care how tragic. I talked about the death of my sister. There still is a silver lining in what happened to me. I'm able to relate. I'm able to talk to people about my process and what I went through, not because I read it in a book, but because I live it. This is me. So for those that are weak, doesn't it say the strong shall bear the
infirmities of the
weak? So I'm able to bear up for people that aren't and to show them the way. That's just one part. But then the other part is people like me come up with tools and solutions and strategies for other people. So there was a silver lining in what happened to me. I believe it's a part of what makes me. So I can look at this sculpture here, and I can look at, the scrapes on it. Oh, there's a little bit of dust too. We got to dust that off. I can look at that, and I can look at the scrapes and the scratches on it, as well as the form of it and the color. My molestation is one of the scrapes, but it makes me me. Does it detract from my beauty? It's just a part of me. So I think we need to look at embracing everything about ourselves, because there's something that came out of it that we can ensure works for our good and for the good of our fellow man.
That sounds like it takes a lot of self-reflection. And one of the tools that you talk about is understanding your triggers, your strongholds and stuff like that. How do you say, let's just walk through, like you've done the work. How do you go from, okay, this is a problem and this is a trigger, and then walking yourself to a self-reflection to the point where you're at now? You don't get to a point of inner peace without walking through that.
One thing is they can get my book, Trauma Treatment, which also comes with video lessons to walk them through all the steps. That's really important because it breaks down step by step. This is what you do. This is how you walk through the process. The process for getting through trauma is so clandestine. It's abstract. It's not like very definitive. So I said, let's make it definitive and let me describe and explain in detail each step, what it does, what it means, and how you move through each step. But I think that that's the best thing that someone can do. Identifying a trigger is important. You need to be aware of what sets you off, how it sets you off, and what is the feeling and the narrative that it makes you start to tell yourself. Until you identify that, you won't know how to push back and how to rework that narrative so that you're not still stamping or engraving the wrong narrative into your psyche. You're instead rewriting over it with the right narrative.
And so it sounds like you're writing over the right narrative. Is the difference between self-reflection and rumination is about what you focus on, correct or no?
So typically what happens is when you go through something traumatic, everything in you doesn't want that to happen ever again. So you start to develop these defense mechanisms to guard yourself and to keep this from ever happening. Also, those defense mechanisms are to help you to get through whatever that trauma was. Usually you feel overwhelmed and incapable of dealing with the trauma. So we have the defense mechanisms. It could be your defense mechanisms that you self-sabotage. You keep choosing the wrong person. Why? Because you're afraid of being hurt. So you unconsciously choose the wrong person, so you keep putting yourself in situations that can never win. But you see what happens though, You're afraid of being hurt. You're afraid that love won't work for you. So you keep sabotaging. So you never really get to live it all out and figure out whether it will. Self-sabotage. Your defense mechanism could be that anger is your thing. You know, every time somebody you feel hurt or whatever, you get upset and start a fight. It could also be that you deny, you're in denial. Whatever the defense mechanism is, though, there's a narrative that goes with it. That narrative plays in the unconscious mind. So the unconscious mind is not your frontal lobe. So it's not a conscious thought that you're having. I remember I had been praying about something in my life, and I was in LA. I was just finishing doing a show, and I was heading to the airport. I'm walking to the gate, and all of a sudden, as I'm walking to the gate, I could hear my inner dialogue. It shocked me what I was thinking in my mind. It was in my subconscious mind, but I heard it, so I was able to bring it to my conscious mind and to examine, like, this is what you're thinking about myself. This is what I was thinking about myself as I was walking to the gate. And so once I started to identify, I would notice that I would become aware when wrong dialogue would start to spin off in my mind. Is this making sense to you?
Yes, yes. So it sounds like it's like you heard the thought and then you
Then
kind
I
of
was
brought it
able
out.
to rework it.
Yeah, so you brought it out and you were like, okay, let's figure out where this is coming from, right or wrong.
Yeah, I saw where it was coming from because the dialogue kind of lets you know where it's coming from.
Okay.
So I was able to see the dialogue and say, hey, this is not what I want. And then I was able to course correct the dialogue. Say, for example, you say to yourself, you're in a relationship with somebody, you're dating them. And now all of a sudden they say something to you. Like they'll maybe text you or call you and say, hey, I can't really talk right now. Let me get back with you. Don't call me, I'll call you. And all of a sudden you're like thinking, oh my God, they're rejecting me, because just like my old relationship, I was rejected. And you start reliving through the fear of that conversation, whatever had happened to you in the past. Now, do you have enough information to even know whether this is that?
No.
But you don't know if the person's parent just died, they're going through something, they want to just have time to work through whatever they're going through, then they're going to call you. So they're just letting you know that. But no, you see it as they're dissing me. Here it is. So they think I'm not worthy. They don't like me. They're not into me like that. And so your mind will start to ruminate over and over again on these negative thoughts about whatever that other trauma made you feel and think. You get it?
Absolutely.
So this is where the rumination happens. Now, if I keep saying the same thing, if I keep rubbing my finger through a stone like this, guess what happens?
You're going to start to bleed.
It engraves a line in that stone. It starts to engrave. Rumination does the same thing to the mind. When you keep thinking the same thing over and over again, your brain rewires itself to support that thought. You start thinking about it more and more. You start to form the dendrites in your brain. There are these little branches on the neurons in your brain. The more you keep thinking the same thought, the more of these little branches form until that bad boy is looking like this. So then it keeps that same thought at the front of your mind as a prevailing thought, which means that, your thoughts control what?
Everything.
Your behavior. What you believe, what you think, controls what you do. So now you're going to be talking to that person, responding as if they just did this and that to you. You don't even know, but you've been ruminating over, oh, I see. So think about it. When you talk to the person, when you finally do speak with them later on that day or the next day or whatever, I don't think you're going to come to the phone like, hey, what's up? Is everything okay? You're going to be like, So now you can call. So now we can talk, huh? And I'm sure if the person has really been going through something, they're going to be kind of put off. Yeah. And you can just see how things get spun into motion that never should have been. But you do a lot of suffering because most of what you live out in your mind because of trauma is stuff that hasn't even happened. Off of something that happened a long time ago, your fear from what happened a long time ago makes you feel like that same thing is still happening. But I'll guarantee you one thing. If you fear that and you think that, I'll prove it to you. Your behavior is going to make the same thing happen to you again. Even though the person had no intentions. That wasn't how they felt. But because of the way you're reacting.
They have no choice but to act that way.
It's a setup. Hence why you have circles in your life. The same thing keeps happening to you. You're on repeat. So how do you change the cycle? You break the cycle by changing the thought. Changing the thought and the belief changes the behavior, and then you have a new life.
That's really, really good.
You got to think on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like,
Yeah, I got to chew on that a little bit.
You know, I don't smoke now. No, but it's really like,
It's like from the 20s when they were all stylish with the little.
yeah. But you can think about it, and I can just recall so many times, like the fear. For me, one of my fears came from, and I know this sounds weak, but the trauma of my parents divorcing. It traumatized me. At 33 years old, I was traumatized because I felt like my dad had divorced me too. And it did change. Up until the day he died, it changed the dynamic of our relationship. We weren't like this anymore. We didn't see each other all the time. We didn't talk all the time. There was great distance. There was animosity. That trauma made me feel uncertain in my own marriage. Because I was like, if they can't make it work, what did I learn that can make me know how to make my own marriage work? What have I learned? Hence my work. Because I want to know how to make marriage work, how to build strong families and strong marriages, and children that don't have to go through what I went through.
That's super profound, because not only did you saw something. There's actually a lot of different ways to go, but the first way I want to go about it is when you said you saw something break down. It affected you, but it didn't let you define you. And so it's almost as if you were, now it's kind of like everything that you knew was gone. Now I have to still have faith to forge forth this road that I know is possible. I forget what you called it in the book, but you was like mapping to a place called there. And building that road to there. How did you do that? How did you have the courage to do that?
But I don't understand your question.
So how did you have the courage to build something that you didn't know was there? Like you had evidence of it.
But I think everybody knows who they want to be. From the time you're 5 years old, in your mind's eye, you know who you are. You might not have vocabulary to express it, but every child, what happens is we forget. Because so many people tell us, oh, you can't do that. And don't you want to be this instead? And the disapproval and those sorts of things that kind of reposition us and causes us to edit who we are until we forget. Kids, that's why they tell you everything. Oh, what? Your breath smells bad. Mama, look at that lady. She looks like they'll say all kind of stuff. Because a child is but they come knowing. They figure it out really easily. They just aren't able to communicate it. So figuring out who you want to be. And this is why I say, if you don't like something, you feel ashamed about something about you, you have the power to change it. You just got to do the work. Nothing is for free. You just got to do the work. So you knew who you should have been. Have you become that person yet? No. Okay, so then what work do you need to do to become that person? It's really that simple. And now you ain't got to register in a university. Everything's virtual. You can just sit in your house and just log on instead of being on television. You can actually begin the process of making the person that you always saw yourself being in your mind's eye. It's right at your fingertips.
That's good. Do you have any closing thoughts for the people today about what steps they should take to become the person that they always knew themselves to be, but haven't become yet?
I understand that the process might seem murky. It might seem unclear. And that's why I wrote the book about it, because to me, there was no one that explained it to me. If I didn't have a strong prayer life, I would have never found my way through. But I think that there were certain things about myself that made it very easy. I'm very self-aware. I don't mind the truth. So I would say for those that want to find the path, one of the things you have to condition yourself to is being open to hearing the truth and exploring the truth. So if you're given to passive aggression or denial, it might be more challenging for you. So you definitely are going to need something or someone to help you. So I would say see a therapist or see a coach. It doesn't have to be me. Or get a book and hopefully find one that has steps how to. I searched. I didn't really see ones that took you through. They wrote about trauma, but they didn't take you on the path to recovery. So trauma treatment should do that for you. Hey, thanks for tuning into this podcast. Hopefully it's going to be of great help for you as you're on your journey to healing and wholeness. Stay tuned for the next one. Can't wait to see you back. Hey, Dr. Jacquie here. I'm your how-to lady. How to do life, how to do love, and how to do you, boo. So click, like, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more to come.